Hello everyone, Piscean here. This is going to be a very long video, and I'm going to be going over an advanced natal chart analysis, and I've made a lot of other videos where I say that these are advanced natal chart analysis, but in this video specifically, we're going to go into a few things that I haven't made in other videos incorporated into this here, and I want to give a shout out to Report Labs, because the PDF file creation couldn't have been made without it. And in this video, we're going to look at the Western and Vedic astrology of this chart, as well as fixed stars, midpoint dynamics, tight orb aspects, and affliction synthesis. We're also seeing that this ascendant is Taurus 23 degrees 55 in midheaven, Capricorn 29 degrees 34. Now, this is a interpretive monograph. It's prepared with rigor, traditional and contemporary technique, and I believe this is how you should receive your natal chart read to you as a client. So let's just jump right into it. We see here that this monograph presents an integrated natal analysis of the chart directed for the state, and this is, of course, the calculation, the data we need. The work employs classical Western techniques to make aspects, house rulerships, planetary condition, modern depth psychological overlays, Chiron, Lilith, vertex, fixed star Purans, and conjunctions, selected Arabic parts, and a complementary Vedic geotish perspective using the sidereal zodiac and whole sign houses. Midpoint structures are examined with particular attention to orbs under 1 degrees 30 and the configurations that interface with the luminaries, angles, and outer planets. So right away, that's a lot that we're going to look at. We're not just looking at, oh, you're a sun in Gemini, so this is going to happen to that. No. Emphasis is placed upon the tightest aspects as structural bones of the psyche. Afflictions, squares, and oppositions that operate both as internal tension systems and externalizing agents in relationship, vocation, and health. And the creative and genius potential signatures latent in the Uranian and Neptunian configurations in this chart. The tone is faculty level, technical, non-moralizing, and oriented toward pedagogical clarity. All planetary positions, house cusps, and aspect orbs are taken from the supplied dataset, where minor discrepancies arise from rounding. The supplied degree minute values are privileged. So here we see the core chart signature, and we would look at how the chart is dominated by this powerful Piscean stellium in the 11th house, like Sun, Mercury, Venus, and Uranus clustered between 0 degrees and 18 degrees Pisces. This concentration of personal planets in the sign of the fish and in the house of collective networks, hopes, and non-blood kinship establishes a primary signature of visionary idealism, fluid identity, and a need to dissolve ego boundaries within groups or humanitarian causes. Sun's tight separating conjunction with Uranus at 1 degrees 18 injects an electrical, sudden, and often revolutionary quality into the core sense of self. The native is unlikely to experience a conventional trajectory of self-realization. The ascendant in the final degrees of Taurus supplies a stabilizing, sensual, and tenacious persona that can mask the underlying mutability. Taurus rising with Capricorn midheaven creates a double Earth angular axis, lending practical ambition and a capacity for sustained effort. Yet the moon in Libra in the 6th, squared by Mars and trine by Neptune, introducing a strong need for relational harmony in the arena of daily work and health, frequently compromised by Martian pressure and Neptunian diffusion. Jupiter and Saturn form a near exact square, 2 degrees 58, separating a classic signature of the philosopher under pressure, experiencing the meaning is continually tempered by structural realism. The square is reinforced by Mars' opposition to Saturn and a square to Jupiter, producing a dynamic tension triangle among the 3 planets that governs how drive, belief, and discipline interact throughout the life. Here's the natal wheel sketch. Key points for Western. Positions approximate, places cusps simplified for illustration. Schematic natal wheel with key bodies, places cups simplified. So we can clearly see ascendant right here, of course. And then we see Saturn sitting in the 3rd house with Moon sitting in 6th. Actually, it should be right there. And Jupiter. And we see part of fortune, Pluto sitting in 8th, with Mars sitting in the 9th, midheaven, Chiron sitting in the 10th, Neptune as well. We see Uranus, Mercury, Sun, Venus sitting in the 11th, and that gives us our story. So planetary placements and house emphasis. We look at the Piscean 11th house complex, Moon in Libra in the 6th house, Mars in Capricorn in the 9th house. So Sun at 8 degrees 09 Pisces, and Uranus at 6 degrees 50 Pisces, Mercury at 18 degrees 31 Pisces, and Venus at 002 degrees Pisces, occupying the 11th house. The Sun-Uranus conjunction is the tightest personal planet aspect in the chart and functions as a lifelong signature aspect. It describes an identity that is both highly sensitive Pisces and suddenly disruptive or inventive Uranus. The native may experience periodic radical shifts in self-concept, often catalyzed by group affiliations or technological creative breakthroughs. Venus at the very beginning of Pisces is still within the Sun's orbit of influence, 8 degrees 06 applying, and is forming a broad Sun-Venus conjunction that softens the Uranian age with aesthetic and relational idealism. Mercury in the same sign and house suggests thought processes that are imaginal, nonlinear, and attuned to collective undercurrent rather than purely analytical frameworks. Moon in Libra at 6 degrees 14 Libra in the 6th house. It seeks emotional security through balanced daily rhythms, aesthetic environments, and cooperative work relationships. The applying square from Mars, 7 degrees 52, introduces a chronic undercurrent of irritation or defensive assertion within the work health sphere. The native may oscillate between diplomatic accommodation and sudden sharp reactions. The wide applying trine from Neptune, 9 degrees 40, offers a compensatory channel of imaginative, spiritual release, but also risks idealizing colleagues or dissolving necessary boundaries and service roles. Mars in Capricorn in the 9th. So Mars is at 14 degrees 07 Capricorn, exalted, lending disciplined, strategic willpower. Placed in the 9th house, this energy is directed toward higher learning, belief systems, long-distance travel, the pursuit of meaning. So the applying opposition to Saturn, 6 degrees 46, square to Jupiter, 3 degrees 47, created classic frustrated ambition, overreach pattern. The drive to master knowledge or to expand horizons is repeatedly checked by structural limits or by the consequences of excess. When integrated, this configuration produces formidable endurance in intellectual or spiritual disciplines. Jupiter-Saturn square in the 6th third axis. Jupiter retrograde, 17 degrees 55 Libra in the 6th, and Saturn retrograde at 20 degrees 53 Cancer in the 3rd form a separating square of 2 degrees 58. So both planets retrograde intensify the internal dialogue between growth and restriction. In the 6th, Jupiter seeks to expand service. Health protocols are daily crafted into something philosophically significant. Saturn in the 3rd demands rigorous, sometimes heavy, mental structures and sibling communication responsibilities. The square ensures that neither expansion nor contraction proceeds unchecked, an excellent signature for mature scholarship or for any vocation requiring both vision and exactitude. We see outer planets, nodes, and sensitive points. So Neptune at 15 degrees 55 Aquarius in the 10th house colors the public image in career with collective, technological, or utopian ideals. The career may involve media, healing arts, or network social innovation. Pluto at 24 degrees 17 Sagittarius in the 8th indicates deep transformative processes around shared resources, sexuality, and existential meaning. The part of fortune, 22 degrees 01 Sagittarius, and it's conjunct Pluto, 2 degrees 15, it suggests that material and psychological luck arises through profound regeneration rather than surface ease. And Rahu retrograde, of course, at 25 degrees 19 Aries in the 12th, points toward an evolutionary direction of courageous, independent action that must be integrated with the unseen collective or spiritual dimensions of life. Chiron at 0 degrees 22 Aquarius conjunct the midheaven, 0 degrees 47, places a wound and healing signature directly on the vocation axis. The native may be called to professionalize the healing of collective or technological fractures. Tight orb aspect structural keys. Aspects with orbs under approximately 2 degrees 30 are treated as structural rather than incidental. The following table isolates the tightest configurations. Interpretive weight is proportional to both orb and the dignity of the planets involved. So here we see planet A, aspect, planet B, orb, and applying separated. So vertex for planet A, the aspect is sextiling, and sextiling Pluto. Then orb of 0 degrees 14, it is applying. The ascendant sextiling Lilith, 0.47 degrees separating. the midheaven conjunct Chiron, with an orb of 0.47 degrees. It's applying the node trine Pluto, 1.01 degrees, applying Sun conjunct Uranus, orb 1.18 degrees, separating. Vertex opposition the node, 1.16 degrees orb, applying. For Jupiter trine Neptune, 1.59 degrees orb, applying. Lilith conjunct Saturn, 2.14 degrees, separating. Mercury trine Saturn, 2.22 degrees, applying. Fortune conjunct Pluto, 2.15 degrees, applying. Jupiter square Saturn, 2.58 degrees, separating. And node square Lilith, 2.11 degrees, applying. Tightest aspects ordered by increasing orb. So vertex Pluto sextile at 0 degrees 14, so closest non-angular contact in the chart. And we see a horizontal bar representation of the 10 tightest aspects, with the orb being lesser than 3 degrees highlighted. So, for example, of particular note is the vertex Pluto sextile at 0 degrees 14. And the vertex, often described as the point of fated encounter, is here locked in near perfect harmonious aspect with Pluto. This implies that transformative power-laden or underworld experiences arrive through relationships and events that feel predestined, yet are negotiated with relative ease once the native accepts the depth required. The midheaven Chiron conjunction 0 degrees 47 similarly indicates that the vocational path is inseparable from the wound-heal archetype. Public recognition may come precisely through the areas in which the native has suffered and subsequently developed expertise. So, yeah, orb degrees, we see Fortune conjunct Pluto at probably 2.1. And vertex sextile Pluto. Sun at sextile Lilith, midheaven conjunct Chiron, node trine Pluto, Sun conjunct Uranus, vertex opposition node Jupiter trine Neptune, Lilith conjunct Saturn, and Mercury trine Saturn. So here are the afflicting aspects, internal and external dynamics. Afflictions, with your squares and oppositions, are not moral deficits. They are engines of development. Internally, they generate psychic tension that seeks resolution. Externally, they tend to manifest as recurring situational challenges until the native integrates the opposing principles. The principal afflictions are summarized below. So, principal afflicting aspects and their characteristic expressions. You see the aspect, as well as the orb, and a primary manifestation. So Moon square Mars with an orb of 7.52 degrees, and emotional volatility, impulse versus diplomacy. Mars opposition Saturn, 6.46 degrees, blocked drive, discipline, frustration, or delayed assertion. Mars square Jupiter, 3.47 degrees, overextension of energy, risk of access and belief or travel. Jupiter square Saturn, 2.58 degrees, expansion, contraction, tension, realism versus optimism. Mercury square Pluto, 5.46 degrees, obsessive or transformative thought, power dynamics and communication. Ascendant square Venus, 6.06 degrees, self-image versus relational harmony friction. Midheaven square Node, 4.15 degrees, career path versus evolutionary direction tension. The Node square Saturn, 4.25 degrees, karmic responsibility, structural lessons around growth. Lilith square Jupiter, 5.12 degrees, shadow expansion, unorthodox belief or access. And vertex square Saturn at 3.09 degrees, fated encounters with limitation or authority. Now we see internal affliction dynamics. Internally, the Mars-Saturn opposition functions as a psychic break. Desire and will are met with an equal and opposite force of inhibition or duty. This can produce periods of self-doubt, delayed gratification that feels punitive, or compensatory over-control of impulse. The Moon-Mars square adds an emotional reactivity layer, feelings of being attacked, or of needing to defend one's right to comfort arise in the daily sphere. Jupiter-Saturn square internalizes the classic tension between faith and skepticism, optimism and pessimism. The native may swing between expansive confidence and austere self-criticism until mature synthesis is achieved, often through long-term scholarly or professional commitment. We see external relational affliction dynamics. Now, externally, these same aspects tend to recruit partners, colleagues, or institutional structures that enact the missing pole. Mars-Saturn may appear as authority figures who block or delay the native's initiatives or situations requiring extraordinary patience. Moon Mars can manifest as conflict with coworkers or health crises that force a renegotiation of daily rhythms. Ascendant Venus square often surfaces the friction between self-presentation and a desire to be liked or aesthetically approved. Relationships may begin with idealization and encounter reality testing around values or appearance. Midheaven node square indicates that career milestones and evolutionary growth do not always coincide smoothly. Vocational choices may feel at odds with a deeper sense of destiny, until the 12th house Rahu lessons, which are surrender, collective service, spiritual courage, are consciously integrated. And here we see midpoint analysis. Midpoint represents the sensitive axis between two planetary principles. When a third planet or angle occupies the midpoint within a tight orb, conventionally less than 1 degree 30 for personal work, the third factor becomes a translator of dyadic tension or harmony, and the following selected midpoints are of high interpretive value in this chart. So here's a midpoint, longitude, sign, degree, as well as notable proximity. So selected critical midpoints with proximity notes. We see Sun, Moon, which longitude we won't really get into, but the sign degree is important. And we notice the notable proximity part of fortune, 22 degrees Sag, Pluto 24 degrees Sag, core identity fused with regenerative luck. Sun, Mercury, Pisces 13.3 degrees, Sun, Venus, Pisces 4.1 degrees, Sun, Mars, Aquarius 11.1 degrees, Moon, Mars, Scorpio 25.2 degrees, Moon, Saturn, Leo 28.6 degrees, Venus, Mars, Aquarius 7.1 degrees, Mars, Saturn, Libra 17.5 degrees, Jupiter, Saturn, Virgo 4.4 degrees, Ascendant Midheaven, Pisces 26.7 degrees, Sun Ascendant, Aries 16.0 degrees, Moon Ascendant, Leo 0.1 degrees, Venus, Uranus, Pisces 3.4 degrees, Sun, Uranus, Pisces 7.5 degrees, Mercury, Saturn, Taurus 19.7 degrees, Node Pluto, Aquarius 24.8 degrees, and Fortune Pluto, Sagittarius 23.1 degrees. Now specifically for Venus, Uranus, we see near Sun, I should have already talked about these. I'm sorry guys. Mars, Saturn, classic block drive midpoint. It activates the opposition. Jupiter, Saturn is philosophical realism, square already present. Ascendant Midheaven, identity, vocation axis, near late Pisces, early Aries. Venus, Uranus, near Sun, Uranus, Venus cluster, innovative relating. Sun, Uranus, near the actual conjunction, reinforces signature. Mercury, Saturn, mental discipline. Mercury, trine Saturn, is already tight. Node Pluto, evolutionary axis, node trine Pluto, already tight. And Fortune Pluto, coincident with Sun, Moon zone, destiny through depth transformation. And we see the Sun Moon midpoint at approximately 22 degrees Sagittarius. It falls within 2 degrees of both the part of Fortune and Pluto. And this is a high potency structure. The core sense of purpose, Sun Moon, is fused with regenerative power, Pluto, and with the point of material and psychological flourishing, Fortune. Life direction is therefore unlikely to feel superficial. Periods of crises or profound change tend to coincide with the emergence of authentic vocation and luck. The already tight node Pluto trine is reinforced by their midpoint dynamics, underscoring an evolutionary mandate toward empowerment through shared or occult resources. So this is very in-depth so far, and now we're going to look at this right here, which is selected critical midpoints. Longitudinal placement of selected critical midpoints. Alright, so as we see, the Ascendant Midheaven, Pisces 26.7 degrees, identity, vocation. Venus, Uranus, Pisces 3.4 degrees, relational innovation. Node Pluto, Aquarius 24.8 degrees, evolutionary axis. And they're going off the chart now. Fortune Pluto, Sagittarius 23.1 degrees, coincident zone. Sun, Moon at Sagittarius 22.2 degrees near Fortune and Pluto. Mars, Saturn, Libra 17.5 degrees, drive structure. And Jupiter, Saturn, Virgo 4.4 degrees, expansion limit. Starting from 150 degrees on the ecliptic longitude to 200 degrees. Then in the middle. And then going off. So here, we're looking at fixed star contacts, fixed star conjunctions within roughly 1 degrees, and important house placements are noted below. Traditional meanings are drawn from classical and modern sources and are offered as symbolic rather than deterministic. So Algol in the first house, Most notorious star in the catalog associated with intensity, Medusa archetype, and the capacity to confront or embody the terrible. With the ascendant at 23 degrees 55 Taurus, Alcos is close enough to coat the person with magnetic, sometimes intimidating presence. Properly integrated, it confers the power to face shadow material without flinching. Mismanaged, it can attract projection of others' fears. Spica and Arcturus, both in the 6th house near the vertex. Spica is traditionally one of the most benefic stars, promising talent, protection, and success in intellectual or artistic pursuits. Arcturus has a pioneer and protective quality. Their proximity to the vertex suggests that fated encounters and work-related opportunities carry a distinctly fortunate or talent-revealing character. Regulus in the 5th, the heart of the lion associated with royalty, ambition, the risk of a fall from high places if hubris intervenes. In the 5th house, it colors creative self-expression, romance, speculation with a regal or high-stakes quality. And Aries in the 7th, rival of Mars, terror of war, and obsession in the house of partnership indicate intense, sometimes competitive or transformative relationships. The native may attract partners who embody Antarean drive or who require the native to confront their own intensity. Fomalhaut in the 11th, one of the 4 royal stars associated with idealistic, mystical, or out-of-this-world aspirations. Its presence in the 11th near the Piscean sign reinforces the visionary, collective, and potentially utopian orientation of the native's hopes and networks. In additional contexts of note include Rigel and Capella in the early houses 1st, 2nd, Sirius and the Asili in the Cancer houses 3rd, 4th, Vega in the 9th, each adding layers of protection, learning, or elevated perspective according to traditional delineation. And now we look at Vedic Jyotish complementary view. So using the sidereal zodiac approximate Lahiri Ayanamsa for 2005, the chart shifts notably. The ascendant moves to Taurus 0 degrees, Sun falls in Aquarius rather than Pisces, key sidereal placements. So here we go. Notice that Sun is now in Aquarius, 14 degrees 13. Moon is now in Virgo, 12 degrees 19. Mercury is now in Aquarius, 24 degrees 35. And we see Venus in Aquarius, 6 degrees 06. Mars, Sagittarius, 20 degrees 12. Jupiter, Virgo, 23 degrees 59, still retrograde. Saturn, still retrograde, this time Gemini, 26 degrees 58. Uranus, Aquarius, 12 degrees 54. Neptune, Capricorn, 21 degrees 59. Pluto, Sagittarius, 0 degrees 21. Node is Aries, 1 degrees 23. And Lilith, Gemini, 29 degrees 12. So, in the Vedic frame, the native is a Taurus Lagna with Sun in Aquarius, an airy reformer solar placement that emphasizes intellectual independence and humanitarian concerns. Moon in Virgo sidereal sharpens the emotional need for order, service, and analytical clarity, contrasting with tropical Libra Moon's relational emphasis. Jupiter and Saturn remain retrograde. Their mutual relationship continues to highlight the tension between expansion and contraction, now filter to Virgo and Gemini respectively. The supplied Aruda Lagna AL and related Arudas A2 through A11 UL will provide additional layers for status, wealth, and Maya perceived reality analysis. Yogi point at Libra, 29 degrees 52, and Avayogi at Aries, 29 degrees 52, offer further timing and favorability indicators within the Jyotish system. A full dasha and Gochara analysis lies beyond the scope of the present monograph, but is recommended for predictive work. And that's actually going to be coming up as well. Okay. So in another video, I'm going to do a full video on the Vedic Dasha as well as, Gochara analysis, step by step, to help you guys understand how to do that. Alright, so now let's get into the synthesis here. The life path, we see that this chart presents a native whose core identity is both highly sensitive and electrically innovative. Sun, Uranus, and Pisces 11th. Taurus, Ascendant, and Capricorn midheaven supply the earth necessary to ground vision into tangible form. Primary developmental task is the integration of Mars, Saturn, Jupiter tension triangle learning to assert disciplined will without chronic self-blockage and to expand belief systems without recklessness. Creative and intellectual genius is strongly indicated by Pisces stellium, Mercury Saturn trine, mental endurance, and structured imagination. Vertex Pluto sextile access to transformative depth to encounter, and the presence of Spica and Arcturus near the vertex. The Chiron midheaven conjunction further suggests that the professional expression of genius may take the form of healing, mentoring, or technological or artistic innovation that addresses collective wounds. Afflictions function as a necessary friction that prevents a Piscean tendency toward diffusion from dissolving all structure. When the native consciously works with a Mars-Saturn opposition, for example, through martial discipline, long-term projects, or therapeutic confrontation of inhibition, and with the Moon-Mars square emotional boundary skills in daily life, the same configurations become sources of exceptional resilience and focused power. So in summary, this is a chart of the visionary realist capable of profound imaginative flights, yet required by its own geometry to return repeatedly to the demands of form, duty, and relational integrity. The evolutionary trajectory, node in Aries, 12th turn Pluto, points toward courageous independent action that ultimately serves a collective or spiritual purpose, an alchemy of self and other that the tight vertex Pluto contact will continually facilitate through fated encounters. So here are notes, footnotes, and then we're going to get into the appendixes. So we see all planetary longitudes and aspect orbs are taken from data supplied by current, minor rounding differences of less than 0.05 degrees ignored. Houses in Placidus, Western Vedic houses are whole sign is supplied. Midpoint formula used is the shorter arc circular mean. Results are expressed in absolute ecliptic longitude. Fixed star positions are those supplied and are consistent with standard early 21st century catalogs, precession adjusted. Affliction is used in the technical sense of square or opposition aspect without moral connotation. The vertex is treated as a sensitive point, a fated or encounter-oriented experience following modern practice. Chiron is interpreted in the contemporary wound heal mentor archetype. Classical texts do not include it. Black Moon Lilith is the main lunar apogee as supplied. Interpretive tradition follows modern depth, psychological, and feminist astrological streams. Part of fortune is calculated by the day formula, consistent with the supply position, as ascendant adding moon, subtracting sun. This analysis is pedagogical and research-oriented. It does not constitute personal counseling or predictive advice. So, this is the full Western planetary positions and house cusps Placidus, as well as fixed star catalog selected. And I'm going to give a note. Read this methodological note on midpoints. The midpoint of two bodies, A and B, is the longitude equidistant from both along the shorter arc. When a third body, C, occupies the point within a tight orb, C is said to activate or translate the AB dyad. In the present chart, Sun, Moon, midpoints, proximity to Fortune, and Pluto is treated as a high priority structure because it links the two luminaries, core psyche, with the point of flourishing and with the planet of deep transformation. Similar logic is applied to Mars, Saturn, the opposition's midpoint, and Jupiter, Saturn, squares midpoint. Practitioners using the 90-degree style or cosmobiological methods may further refine these contexts. The present analysis remains within the framework classical aspect theory augmented by midpoint awareness. So that is what I believe a natal report should definitely look like. Detailed, extensive, and not missing a beat. So there's also a follow-up here. Quickly, there's going to be a quick follow-up. We're going to talk about detailed midpoint combinations in the alkyl investigation for this chart. Kind of like just a think piece as to what we just went over in more detail. So we see that what we just went over, it established the primary natal architecture tied aspects in a preliminary midpoint survey. This present monograph expands the midpoint work into a systematic examination of planetary pictures, so AB equals C structures, as well as isolates the strongest activations by orb, and supplies extended psychological and developmental interpretations for each major combination. A dedicated investigation of alkyl, P per se, which lies in the first house near the ascendant, forms the second major pillar of the volume. Traditional, modern, and mythological layers are synthesized with the native-specific angular planetary context. Here's the midpoint methodology recalled. So we see a midpoint AB is the ecliptic longitude line equidistant from planets or points, A and B along the shorter arc. When a third body C occupies a longitude within a tight orb here, lesser than 1 degree 30 for strong considerations, less than 1 degree for high priority, the structure is written AB equals C and is termed a planetary picture. The third factor translates or activates the dyadic relationship of A and B. In the Hamburg School, Iranian astrology, and cosmobiology traditions, such pictures are treated as independent structural units of the psyche and of external circumstance. All midpoints below are calculated from the absolute longitudes established in Volume 1. Orbs are the smallest arc distances. Self-hits where C is one of the pair are excluded from activation lists. So C, the strongest midpoint occupations, with the orb being less than 1.0 degrees. And we notice that, of course, we have Sun, Moon, and we're looking at longitude as well, occupied by an orb. So Sun, Moon, Uranus, Pluto, Venus, Jupiter, Mars, Neptune, Mercury, Mars, Mars, Saturn, Mars, Neptune, Moon, Uranus, Mars, Ascendant, Venus, Chiron, Sun, Pluto, and Uranus, Pluto. It's the highest priority midpoint occupations ordered by tightness of orb. And we can notice that Sun, Moon, longitude, Sagittarius, 22 degrees 11, and it's occupied by Fortune, with the orb being 0.17 degrees. And the highest orb we see here is 0.98 degrees with the midheaven, Uranus, Pluto, Aquarius, 0 degrees 33. So Uranus, Pluto, up here, this is for Chiron, and the orb is 0.18 degrees. So the orb is very important. Venus, Jupiter, occupied by Pluto, 0.31 degrees. Mars, Neptune, Aquarius, 0 degrees 01, Chiron, 0.35 degrees. Alright, Mercury, Mars, Aquarius, 16 degrees 19, Neptune, 0.40 degrees. Mars, Saturn, Libra, 17 degrees 30, Jupiter, 0.42 degrees. Mars, Neptune, Aquarius, 0 degrees 01, midheaven, 0.45 degrees. Moon, Uranus, Sagittarius, 21 degrees 31, Fortune, 0.49 degrees. Mars, Ascendant, Pisces, 19 degrees 01, Mercury, 0.50 degrees. Venus, Chiron, Aquarius, 15 degrees 11, Neptune, 0.72 degrees. And we see Sun, Pluto, Aquarius, 1 degrees 12, Chiron, 0.84 degrees. Alright, so here we're looking at the strongest midpoint occupations. The orb is less than 1.0 degrees. Strongest midpoint equals planet structures. You see Sun, Moon equals Fortune being the smallest at a whopping, 0.2 on the chart from 1.0, 0.0 to 1.0. And we see our highest is Uranus, Pluto equals midheaven at 1.0 itself. There's also Uranus, Pluto equals Chiron. There's also Venus, Jupiter equals Pluto. Mars, Neptune equals Chiron. Mercury, Mars equals Neptune. Mars, Saturn equals Jupiter. Mars, Neptune equals midheaven. Moon, Uranus equals Fortune. Mars, Ascendant equals Mercury. Venus, Chiron equals Neptune. And Sun, Pluto equals Chiron. And these are orb degrees. So see the detailed interpretations of critical midpoint combinations. And we notice the Sun, Moon midpoint equals 22 degrees Sagittarius. Calculated longitude here. It's the axis of core identity, fusion of conscious purpose, Sun, and emotional needs, Moon. In the present chart, it falls in late Sag within approximately 2 degrees of both the POF and Pluto. The resulting planetary picture can be read as Sun, Moon equals Fortune, Pluto, within wider orb or more tightly as a zone in which identity, flourishing, and deep transformation occupy the same psychic space. Psychologically, this indicates that the native does not experience the separation between who I am, what brings me fulfillment, and what requires me to die and be reborn. Periods of crisis, loss, and profound regeneration tend to coincide with the emergence of authentic life direction and a sense of being in the right place. Conversely, attempts to pursue superficial success or to avoid depth often produce a feeling of inner emptiness or stalled vitality. Sag flavor adds a quest for meaning, higher knowledge, or cross-cultural experience as a preferred vehicle of this identity transformation process. Developmental task is to treat crises as initiatory rather than merely disruptive, and to allow the POF's promise of flourishing to be realized through rather than despite Plutonian intensity. Fortune, Pluto midpoint. Because Fortune and Pluto are already conjunct within 2 degrees 15, their midpoint lies essentially on the conjunction itself. Reinforces the same zone as Sun, Moon. The picture of Fortune, Pluto equals Sun, Moon wide, where the mutual reinforcement of the two dyads underscores that material and psychological luck is inseparable from process of elimination, shared resources, sexuality, and existential power. Financial or relational breakthroughs often follow periods of letting go. Inheritances, literal or psychological, may arrive after confrontations with mortality or taboo. Node Pluto midpoint. Rahu and Pluto are already in a tight applying trine. 1 degree 01, the midpoint therefore functions as a secondary confirmation of the evolutionary axis. Picture emphasizes the soul's intended direction. Rahu in Aries in the 12th is empowered by and must ultimately expressed through Plutonian regeneration. Courageous independent action is not an escape from depth, but a necessary expression of it. Collective unconscious or spiritual awareness, 12th house, are the theater in which this empowerment unfolds. Mars-Saturn midpoint. We're looking and we see Mars and Saturn are in applying opposition at 6 degrees 46. The midpoint is the geometric center of that opposition, and therefore a highly sensitive point for the expression or blockage of will. When transits or progressions activate this midpoint, the native typically experiences either a surge of discipline effort that overcomes long-standing obstacles, or if unintegrated, a period of enforced delay, frustration, or self-criticism. In daily life, the midpoint can manifest as the need to work harder than peers for comparable results, an experience that over time builds exceptional endurance and strategic patience. Because Mars is in Capricorn exalted and Saturn in Cancer detriment, the midpoint carries a flavor of ambition tempered by emotional caution. The native may feel that every assertive move must first pass an internal security check. Once that check is satisfied, action is unusually sustained and realistic. So Jupiter-Saturn midpoint, the applying square between Jupiter and Saturn, 2 degrees 58 separating the natal, makes their midpoint a permanent zone of philosophical realism. Activations of this midpoint tend to coincide with decisions that require balancing expansion against contraction. For example, whether to enlarge a project, take on debt, commit to a belief system, or prune commitments. In vocational terms, the midpoint supports careers that demand both vision and rigorous structure, law, architecture, academic administration, long-term research, or any field in which optimism must be continuously tested against evidence. Venus-Uranus midpoint. Venus and Uranus are part of the Piscean 11th house cluster, form an applying conjunction 6 degrees 47. The midpoint therefore lies near the Sun-Uranus-Venus complex and reinforces the signature of innovative, sudden, or unconventional relating. Friendships and romantic connections are likely to begin abruptly, to involve shared ideals or artistic experimentation, and require a high degree of freedom. The midpoint also describes an aesthetic that values the unexpected, the collective, and the future-oriented over traditional forms of beauty. And now we look at Sun-Uranus midpoint. Because Sun and Uranus are already conjunct within 1 degrees 18, the midpoint is essentially coincident with the conjunction itself. This is the chart's primary identity signature. Self is sudden insight, as disruptive personal and collective norms, and as a conduit for electrical or inspirational energy. Midpoint activations by transit progression often coincide with breakthroughs in self-concept, radical changes of direction, or moments when the native becomes a catalyst for others. Mercury-Saturn midpoint. Mercury and Saturn are in the applying trine, 2 degrees 22. Midpoint supports mental structures that are both imaginative, Mercury and Pisces, and rigorously ordered Saturn. This is an excellent signature for sustained intellectual work, technical mastery of an artistic medium, or in any discipline that requires the translation of diffuse intuition into durable form. When the midpoint is activated, the native may experience either a productive period of concentrated study, or if Saturn is felt as oppressive, a temporary mental heaviness that nevertheless contains the seed of later clarity. And the ascendant midheaven midpoint of the two angles, sometimes called the point of individuality and vocation, describes the interface between personal style, ascendant, and public role of midheaven. In this chart, the midpoint falls in late Pisces, early Aries territory, linking the angular axis to the same visionary initiatory zone occupied by the node in the Piscean stellium. Career choices that allow the native to appear as a grounded social presence towards ascendant, while pursuing Capricornian ambition through imaginative or collective channels, are especially supported. Additional notable pictures. So we see Moon Mars, Scorpio, emotional drive and the potential for reactive anger or productive assertion. Activations can coincide with health fluctuations or conflicts in the daily environment. 6th house Moon, Venus, Pluto, Capricorn, intensity in relationships and aesthetics, capacity for transformative love or for power struggles around values and resources. Mars, Pluto, Capricorn, concentrated will, potential for compulsive drive or for regenerative physical and sexual energy, requires conscious channeling to avoid burnout or power conflicts. Saturn, Pluto, endurance under extreme pressure, capacity to rebuild structures of profound loss, and a midpoint of historical or generational weight that the native may carry personally. In MC Chiron, already a natal conjunction of 0 degrees 47, the vocational path is inseparable from the wound healer archetype. Public recognition often arrives through the very areas of vulnerability that the native has transformed into expertise. And here is the algal investigation. So, the Algol is a bright eclipsing binary in the constellation Perseus. Its apparent magnitude varies from 2.1 to 3.4 over a period of 2.867 days, the classical winking that ancient observers associated with the blinking or malevolent eye. And the tropical zodiac of the early 21st century lies at approximately 26 degrees 14 Taurus, and the present natal chart descendant stands at 23 degrees 55 Taurus. The separation is therefore 2 degrees 19. While not a partial conjunction, the star falls firmly inside the first house, and within the orb traditionally allowed for a fixed star of Algol's magnitude and historical notoriety to influence the rising degree. So here's Algol's position relative to the ascendant in Taurus, with Taurus ecliptic longitude 0 degrees, starting at the bottom 20 through 30. Algol relative to the ascendant, so 2 degrees 22 separation. First house influence zone, we see Algol sitting right here, and the ascendant is sitting right there, so it's really not that far. It's right there in the middle. So the classical delineations here. Ptolemy groups Algol with the nature of Saturn and Jupiter. The later tradition more consistently assigns it a martial Saturnian character. Medieval and Renaissance authors like Al-Biruni, Ibn Israel, Lilly associate with violence, beheading, sudden misfortune, and the loss of favor, yet also, when well aspected, when the native is of elevated character with the courage to confront the monstrous and with a protective intensity. Robson summarizes the extreme polarity, violence, murder, hanging, decapitation, and electrocution, while simultaneously noting that if the star is well aspected, it gives high honors, preferment, and good fortune. Eberton and Hoffman emphasize the psychological dimension, a tendency toward the pathology of the mind, or constructively toward the ability to look into the abyss without flinching. Mythological later, Medusa and Perseus. So in Greek myth, Algol marks the severed head of Medusa carried by Perseus. Medusa herself, a complex figure, once a beautiful priestess violated in Athena's temple, transformed into a gorgon whose gaze turns the living to stone, and finally slain so that her power can be appropriated by the hero. Feminist in-depth psychological readings recover Medusa as an image of the terrifying feminine, for each that has been demonized, and of the necessity of facing what has been repressed. The native with Algol rising or angular often carries a charge of this archetype, either as one who is projected upon as dangerous, or as one who must learn to wield the Medusa power consciously rather than be possessed by it. Algol in the present chart. So star colors, a persona and physical presence. Taurus rising already confers a solid, sensual, and potentially stubborn demeanor. Algol adds a magnetic intensity, a capacity to unsettle others, and a facial or ocular quality that can be experienced by observers as either hypnotic or intimidating. The native may discover early that people either idealize or fear her without clear external cause, an Algol hallmark of projected shadow. Because the chart's primary planetary emphasis, Piscean 11th house stellium, Sun, Uranus, Mercury, Venus, Algol rising functions as a grounding and intensifying agent for otherwise diffuse, collective, and visionary energies. The earth of Taurus and Algol gives the native a body and a presence that can hold the electrical and imaginal currents of the stellium without dissipating them. In practical terms, this can appear as an unusual ability to remain calm in crises, to speak difficult truths, or to serve as a container for group anxiety, precisely the Medusa function of turning chaotic energy into stillness stone so that it can be examined. Proximity of Algol to the ascendant also indirects the chart's affliction patterns, Moon-Mars square and Mars-Saturn opposition. Already described internalized tension around assertion and emotional safety. Algol can amplify the stakes of these tensions. Anger may feel more absolute, inhibition more life or death, and to the native earth, the monster is not an external enemy, but a power that must be claimed. When integrated, Algol rising often correlates with careers or callings that involve crisis intervention, surgery, depth psychology, protective advocacy, or any field in which one must look steadily at what others prefer to avoid. Algol and the creative genius signature. So genius in the classical sense of the attendant spirit frequently requires contact with the underworld. Algol's placement near the ascendant supplies that contact as a permanent feature of identity rather than as an occasional transit, combined with the Sun-Uranus conjunction, vertex Pluto sextile, and Chiron mid-heaven conjunction. Algol contributes to a profile in which breakthrough creativity arises from the willingness to enter taboo, terrifying, or socially unacceptable territories and to return with form. The danger is identification with the victim or the destroyer. The opportunity is the development of an unshakable capacity to metabolize darkness into insight, art, or protective action. Practical and remedial considerations. We see traditional remedial approaches to Algol include the cultivation of Saturnian discipline, structure, patience, ethical restraint, and of Jovian perspective, humor, meaning, generosity. Because stars and Taurus practices that ground the body, regular physical work, craft, gardening, or any tactile art help stabilize the intensity. Conscious engagement with Medusa imagery, art, dream work, myth study can convert projected fear into own power. Finally, the native's own type, Mercury-Saturn trine, offers a built-in tool, the ability to think carefully and speak with measured authority, even when emotional or collective storms are raging. So here's a concluding synthesis. Midpoint structures examined here reveal psyche organized around a few high potency axes. Identity fused with transformation, Sun, Moon, Fortune, Pluto. Well tested by endurance, Mars, Saturn. Expansion tempered by realism, Jupiter, Saturn. And relationship electrified by freedom, Venus, Uranus. These pictures do not operate in isolation. They form a coherent geometry in which every major developmental crisis is also an opportunity for the native to embody the next layer of her purpose. Algo rising in the first house supplies the archetypal container for that geometry. It ensures that the native's presence itself is never neutral. She will be experienced as intense, magnetic, or unsettling, and she will be required to decide whether that intensity is used unconsciously as protection, magnet, or self-sabotage, or consciously as protective power, creative ferocity, and the capacity to face what others cannot. When the midpoint disciplines of patience, realism, and regenerative courage are allied with the claimed algo, the chart's visionary and innovative potentials gain a formidable vehicle for manifestation in the world. So we're going to go over these notes, and this is, midpoint longitudes calculated from absolute ecliptic positions established in Volume 1, a short arc method used throughout. Activation orb thresholds. It's going to be less than 1 degree high priority, less than 1 degree 30 considered. Wider context noted only when reinforcing an existing natal aspect. Algo position. Its value supplied in the original dataset consistent with standard precession adjusted catalogs for the epoch. Classical sources consulted for algo. Planetary picture notation follows the Hamburg School Convention. And this volume is a research and pedagogical companion. It does not replace lived experience or professional counseling. Thank you for watching this video with peace and love. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you in the next one. Piscean out.